Okay, finally done with the semester. I can get back to reviewing what's next on my list. Okay. Fantastic Four, or more popularly known now as Fant Four Stick, is directed by Josh Trank, written by him, Jeremy Slater, and Simon Kinberg, and stars Miles Teller, Michael B. Jordan, Kate Mara, Jamie Bell, and Toby Kebbell. And this 2015 version of Fantastic Four is once again an origin story where these four kids are grouped together to help with this interdimensional travel thing, but bad things happen and they end up getting superpowers, and that's it. Now here's the thing, it's 2015, and you'd think by now, with all the superhero movies coming out, that we'd have the formula down pat, that we would still be able to produce good superhero movies forever, but apparently that is not the case. Fantastic Four is not only one of the worst movies of the year, it's also one of the worst superhero movies ever made. It's cheap looking, there's this evident lack of effort from everyone on the production team, and it has one of the worst scripts that I've ever seen on film. Now, the least you could expect from a 21st century superhero movie is good visuals, and this movie can't even give us that. I mean, I guess for the first 2/3 of the movie, the CGI is nothing special, but by the time the third act rolls in, like, everything just kind of dies. I mean, you're gonna hear me talk about the third act of this movie a lot, because it's just something special in terms of bad filmmaking. But visually speaking, the third act of this movie takes place all in this like video game-esque dimension, and I don't mean that in a good way. Imagine like a template for SimCity, like a barren wasteland, but with Minecraft graphics. And the visual effects can't really sell the individual powers of the Fantastic Four either. I mean, Reed Richards' stretchy powers are neither cartoonish enough to be fun, nor freaky enough to fit with this more realistic take on the characters. And I was never really convinced that Sue Storm was actually projecting force fields, that Johnny Storm was actually on fire, and that Ben as the Thing was actually there. They all look kind of fake, and the green screen that they use for some of these scenes is just laughably obvious. If that wasn't enough, the production design in this movie is bland and looks cheap, like I said. Most of the movie takes place only really on this one set. So visually speaking, it's really boring. One of the movie's biggest mistakes, I think, that leads to this is that it mistakes grittiness for blandness. You know, taking on a darker tone doesn't mean you can't use color or imagery that has personality in it. And the costume design in this movie, it's laughable. The costumes for the Fantastic Four themselves, they just have these generic jumpsuits that have vaguely defined functions for their powers. But then you get the Doctor Doom, and oh my god, like he looks awful. He looks like, I'm serious, the love child of a trash bag and a crash test dummy. And it doesn't even look like they remembered to animate the crash test dummy, because when Doctor Doom talks, his mouth doesn't move. So it's really weird when you watch this thing walk around, and it's not intimidating at all. Elliot Greenberg and Stephen E. Rivkin are the editors here, and studio interference or not, they're still responsible for what they did here. The mark of a badly edited film, in my opinion, is not only when it's too slow or too fast, but when both these things happen in the same movie. Because for the most part, the pace here is generally slower, but in a way that doesn't really make it feel like there's progression or stakes building. The scenes here are just so disjointed from one another. There's this lack of causality, this lack of feeling like one scene leads naturally to another. And the third act of this movie, again, is just rushed beyond belief. Like, as soon as you're dropped into the third act, it feels like you're in a completely different movie, and I don't mean that in a good way. And don't get me started on the 1.5 action scenes, the way they're edited here. That's right, a superhero movie with only like 1 to 2 action scenes. I mean, here, you don't see the hits land, you don't know who's hitting who, you don't really know what's happening. And Fantastic Four contains the single most jarring time jump I've ever seen in a movie. Like, halfway through, suddenly the screen goes black and this title card appears that says like 1 year later. I'm like, slow down. My issue with this time jump isn't just that it's so abrupt, it's that when we do go 1 year later, it doesn't feel like 1 year has passed. It's no secret that this movie went through a ton of production problems before being released. There's a lot of tension between Josh Trank and the studio, and for me, when this happens, it's really the writing that gets hurt the most, because it's easy to see where Josh Trank wanted to go. Although I will say that the potential his script had, it does not equate to quality of execution, because even without the studio interference, I do think his story is a bit weak. Because for me, the best scripts do go beyond what's on the surface. So, you know you've made a good superhero movie when you really make it about the characters or about a certain theme. But this script blatantly skips over the most emotionally potent parts of the movie. Like when it goes through that 1 year later break, in that 1 year, Reed has been on the run from the military, and the military has weaponized his friends, and that stuff is really interesting. It just blatantly glosses over it so quickly, and we're just kind of forced to assume that it happened. And when the Fantastic Four group together again, there's no tension about, Reed essentially abandoning his friends. And that brings us to the characters. The characters here don't really have any character. They don't really have any unique personality. If you listen to them talk, they all kind of sound the same. And they all lack the Marvel quirk. Like, you know how Stan Lee, when he created his characters back in the day, he made sure that all of his characters had some human quality to them to make them relatable. Like Spider-Man was an outcast in high school, Iron Man eventually became like an alcoholic, the Hulk is the Hulk, but here, there's nothing that really makes them relatable or human. And the relationships between characters are never actually explored. You don't get anything about the romance supposedly between Reed and Sue, you don't get any of that love triangle stuff that they imply with Victor. You don't really see the friendship between Reed and Ben. You don't. I like the fact that they didn't really feel the need to explain why Sue is the adopted sister of Johnny, but again, it doesn't really even feel like they were siblings. Always just these constant hints toward relationships, but they never actually explore those relationships. And the dialogue is just god-awful, especially in the third act, because you can tell that the last act was thrown together so haphazardly, and some of the lines are just painful to listen to, and especially in the final scene, which is something that I don't mind spoiling because I'm gonna tell you not to watch this movie anyway. But the last scene, they're trying to come up with their name. Ben says the word fantastic, and Reed's like, wait, what did you say? And Ben's like, fantastic, and Reed's like, I got it, we're gonna call ourselves, and then it cuts to black and the title flashes, and I'm just like, I audibly just kind of groaned, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. The only thing that was going for this movie really was its cast, because these are all great actors who have been in great things before, but this is why even good casting, in my opinion, isn't good in itself, because it can still lead to bad acting. Miles Teller, who is fantastic in Whiplash, tries his best in this movie. He clearly puts in a lot of effort, although I never really actually bought him as Reed. Like, it just seemed kind of awkward to me. But by the time the third act hits, he has completely lost hope. He 100% phones it in. He turns in such a lazy performance. Michael B. Jordan and Kate Mara both look bored throughout the movie, although they have since redeemed themselves, thankfully. Kate Mara had The Martian, Michael B. Jordan had Creed. And this is more of a knock against the motion capture in the movie, but I never really felt like Jamie Bell's performance shined through the motion capture, and same goes with Toby Kebbell, who is amazing in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, but here he has nothing to do, he really doesn't. And Reg E. Cathy plays Johnny Storm's father, and don't be fooled by his voice, because he has a cool like movie voice, but don't be fooled by that, he's really one note as well throughout the movie. But the thing that annoys me the most here is that there's no chemistry between the stars. And this is supposed to be Marvel's first family. This is supposed to be the OG Marvel superhero team, and you don't even feel like they're friends. There have been a lot of rumors about Josh Trank's behavior on set, like he came in drunk or hungover, he was mean particularly to Kate Mara, but that does not excuse a bad directing job. I mean, again, even before the third act hits, there's a lack of personality and flavor to everything. Again, I can see the grittier sci-fi horror road that Josh Trank wanted to take, but even if the studio wouldn't let him go all out with that, he still didn't set up the movie in such a way that I think would have accommodated the tone effectively, because the tone does jump wildly from one extreme to another. Like, it starts out being kind of Spielbergian, then gets a bit goofy in certain parts, and gets really, really serious, and none of it feels natural. And whoever directed the last act of this movie like has zero idea of how action is supposed to work, because it just feels like a bunch of isolated scenes where someone punches someone else, and then they just strung it together without any coherence, and that's it. Fantastic Four is a terrible movie. It's one of the worst movies of the year. It's one of the worst superhero movies ever made, but I do think it points towards a deeper problem, that is the issue of studio control in this Hollywood model of studio filmmaking. Like, it's gotta stop being this harmful both to people's careers and just the movie industry in general. Like, there's gotta be a better way to do this, guys. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Fantastic Four. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.